right, we are live. All right, from Rochester, New York, from Seattle, Washington, correct?
Yes.
Kansas City, Missouri, or Kansas?
It's technically Kansas, but we'll let it go.
Kansas.
Yeah, we're going to let it
Grove
slide.
City, Ohio. All right.
Yep.
I thought we'd start off just say our names and kind of what we're doing in about 30 seconds. So me, I'm Aaron VanValkenburg, and my family and I are living in Rochester, New York, because I'm working on a doctorate degree at Eastman in music theory, and I want to study pop music. So
we're basically, we're basically academic support for him here.
yes, this is I don't know, whatever.
We're lackeys.
Yeah, Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah. My name is Ryan Steiner, and I live in Seattle. I've never studied music. I like music. And I like long walks on the beach. I don't know.
This is
I'm excited for conversation.
Yeah,
I think we all have really different tastes, and I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah.
I don't have a beach for like 3 hours. And that's
Hey,
a
John,
crappy beach in Ohio.
Why don't you tell me about yourself?
About myself?
John, not you.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah, you're done, Ryan.
Okay.
I cut you off. Jonathan VanValkenburg, and I'm a banker. So basically, I try to make people money, and I do have lots of music background. I'm not pursuing them, any of the things I've done in the past, but an unhealthy like for a lot of pop and 90s rock, including Collective Soul.
So, and Tom Brady.
And Tom Brady. Tom Brady, love you.
And I'm Nate Owens. I live in Olathe, Kansas, which is a suburb of Kansas City, and I have done music performance, a lot of vocal stuff, and I listen to a wide variety, and that variety has even shifted as I've aged, and it changes a lot. And so I think Ryan's right. We have really different tastes, and I think this is going to be really interesting. So looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in a way, we had 4 very different songs, from my view. I think let's start off with Ryan, your selection. Did you choose this because Ryan Adams has your same name? Is that really why?
Yes. Here's a fun fact about me. I only listen to people who have the same name as me. So, it's pretty much Ryan Adams.
All day.
What
every
about
day.
an offshoot of your name, like Brian?
No.
It has your name in it.
Likes Brian Adams.
Oh, that's
too.
true.
Just don't
Maybe
tell
I should
anyone.
Like
widen
Brian
my,
McKnight.
Yeah, I should widen that a little bit. No, I chose this song because it was the first thing that came up on my recently listened to list, because I listened to the song a lot. I'd never listened to a lot of Ryan Adams, and even though I'd heard that it was good music, and it just struck me as like a very cynical, like depressing sort of rock guy, just kind of arrogant and depressing, and I didn't really care to get entangled in that. And then I was looking for some new music while I was sort of in a really low place. And I was like, oh, you know what? To hell with this. I'm just going to listen to something super sad and be down on myself. And so I just pulled up this album, and this is like the first song on the album. And it's a super, like, hopeful, kind of a sad undertone, but it's a hopeful song. And it was just a total reversal of what I had thought his music was or what it was about. And so it sort of opened my eyes more to what his stylings might be. And it's not just, there is some sadness and cynicism in his music, but it's not so overbearing in one direction or another. So this song in particular is just a hopeful, kind of a comforting song, like that warm sweater that you wear on cold nights. So I just was listening to it recently, and so I saw that on the top of my list and thought it would be a fun one for everyone to try out.
You know, Ryan, it's interesting. You talk about how you kind of found it to be kind of a hopeful song, and it's actually I think I talked in one of our earlier conversations before we got into this. I was talking about how it reminded me a little bit of Tom Petty, and I don't know if anyone else is familiar enough with Tom Petty to agree or disagree with me. I'm only familiar enough with him to know that I think this sounds kind of like him. But I was listening to it and I was kind of going through the words, especially, and it does have this kind of uplift to it, this encouraging for this rose over this roses. But what I also thought about is that it has a little bit of like, I'm not sure if it's sort of like this self-serving, almost kind of lustful overtone to it. This idea, he's telling her to go back to bed, go on to bed, take off that dress, and it could be, or it could be like, kind of move on from this, cleanse yourself from this, or it could be a come on, and I and I don't think it's really one or the other or both or however, but I appreciated that ambiguity about the song because I wasn't completely clear which way it was going.
Yeah, and I like that too because it keeps it from just being overtly saccharine, just purely feel good. So that contrast, and like you said, it's neither really one or the other.
Yeah.
And the music part of it is good too. I like that opening hook that kind of runs throughout. That's always running through my head whenever I listen to that album. But what did you guys think, John and Aaron?
My immediate reaction was I liked it, just from a first listen, which is, I think, just one point of discussion for a lot of songs is the evolution of our hearing of things. Songs you hate at the beginning or like or are indifferent to. There's got to be some songs out there that you're indifferent to at the beginning and then you hear them 10 times later and you're still indifferent. That's an interesting song. But this is not the case. I liked it from the beginning. I also kind of heard this as a very positive song, so I was very surprised. I didn't read into it some of the ambiguity that Nate was suggesting, but I was surprised when you said Ryan Adams is kind of a downer kind of music in general. I don't know his music, so
this is actually the first Ryan Adams song I think I've ever heard. At least that I could identify and say that's definitely a Ryan Adams song. And this is now I know of him. He's I think it was his first or second album. I think his second album is Gold is his second album. That was like a really big, one of those flash of lightning kind of albums. I remember when it came out, and everyone's like, "Oh, Ryan Adams, man!" And I think from an outsider, it seemed like he was kind of one of these guys that people wanted to anoint as like a big, he's going to be a big rock star kind of guy. And yeah. I don't know if it's just it never panned out, if he just didn't have the chops for it, or if he didn't really seem to care very much about that. Because he always seemed a little distant publicly. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that was kind of always my impression of him.
I totally agree. I think that when I first heard of Ryan Adams, it was the same kind of thing. It's kind of the Oasis kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where, Oasis is going to be the next Beatles. Believe me, that sounds really ridiculous, but that's what people were saying at the time.
Well, and those first two Oasis albums especially are really super
fantastic. I'm not.
Yeah. I mean,
not going to argue.
There's still time for Oasis. Their star has not set.
I'm pretty sure they broke up, didn't they?
Minor detail.
I don't know.
Just kidding. Continue, John. Sorry.
No, I was just agreeing. I remember the same sentiment that Ryan Adams was going to be, this, because I'm pretty sure early on he won a Grammy.
I think
that
you're right.
kind of sparked a lot of interest in him, and he did. Oh man, I'm trying to remember the first time I heard him. It was probably like the early 2000s. Was the first time I really heard him, It was in college, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I like the song. I'm not. It's not one that I would put at my high end listening, just because when I listen to my country themed type songs, I tend to actually listen to country, Brooks and Dunn and crap like that. So,
Awesome.
John, it's interesting that when you heard the song, you leapt to country, and I got a little touch of that, but to me it was just sort of.
I agree with your Tom Petty assessment as well.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of this sort of. I got this from the Elms, which if people are listening to this, the Elms were a very obscure, formerly Christian band, then kind of just ventured off and did a couple secular albums, and I liked them a lot, but they had this sort of very basic rock and roll kind of sound to them. And I think that at least my first inclination when I hear that kind of stuff is to say, oh, it's just that kind of thing. It's not anything. But it turns out that it's one of those styles that I think is popular for a reason. And when it's really well done, it's very well done. And I think this is a song I haven't lived with as long as you have, Ryan. So I don't know what kind of legs it has beyond just this recording here. But it did have that sort of. It's been in my head, so that's something, right?
Well, I also think it's a matter of personal taste, and my taste has changed over the years. And one of the things that I listen to more is more of the electronic music, and still in the indie scene. I know he's not technically probably indie, but
I think it seems like he functionally is, if not.
I mean, functionally, just because he's not as popular.
Yeah.
But I know I've drifted in that direction. Now, of course, I still have my music roots. Like I'm obsessed with the Stones and things like that. But
sure. Well, John, that's one thing, and this is I think we might be getting off topic, off the song at least a little bit, but one thing I'm interested about in these conversations, because for those of you who don't know, the four of us all went to college together, so we have a lot of history together, kept in touch over the last 10 years or so, and so because of that, we have a sort of a mind picture of what music we liked 10 years ago, but I'm excited to kind of see how that's shifted and what that'll be like now, and I think that's a personal joy I'm getting out of this. So, and you're right, John, it's shift and we evolve in what we like, and I think that's going to be one of the cool things we find here.
So, speaking to that evolution, then we can move on to John. Did you want to talk about your selection?
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of my go-to song. I love to drive to it. If I'm just, in a mood where I just, I need some music and I don't have anything in my mind, that's usually the top one. It was also one of those that would be high on my playlist. I'm pretty sure the Naked the Famous were the most played band in my group list for at least the last 6 months to a year.
That was the one song besides the one I picked that I'd heard, and I've heard it a lot.
True to form to academia, I suppose, but not that I'm totally defined by academia, but I have no idea what's going on in mainstream culture for the most part, and so.
Yes, because the rest of us are all authorities.
It's terrible.
It's
terrible, and actually,
you're all square.
It's interesting, but I do feel like there's studying music in academia almost is counterproductive in some regards, because you end up hovering around like old European white guys' music who've been dead for 200 years, and imagining the world. It's like when we imagine the world was flat, or the Earth was the center of the universe. It's almost like we still pretend like music really revolves around that. And so there's a tendency, we tend in the academic circles, I guess, to ignore what's going on because it's just not relevant. And so I think sometimes I end up falling into that, even though I
Excuse me.
do my best to. I don't do my best. I only listen to rock music, so. What am I talking about? But I mean, I don't end up like knowing like the main hits. You know, I hear that Miley Cyrus has a hit or something, like, oh, that's interesting, I guess, or whatever.
You know, and I also think that's just symptomatic of how we consume music now. Anyway.
Maybe so.
You know, we don't. You know,
We don't
there's
have to listen to radio.
we're so fractured in what we enjoy.
Right.
You know, it's funny to me, like say a 30-year-old says how much they hate Justin Bieber because I have never once in my life heard a Justin Bieber song without trying to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it's like I'm familiar with some of his songs, but it was because I sought them out to say, oh, what is this thing?
Right.
And I know, but I literally could have gone my whole life without hearing it. And I think that's any pop song these days.
It's also politics. It's also a lot to do with just
Yeah.
the internet.
As far as why I think I gravitated towards this song in particular, it's one in a long line of kind of evolution for me of music, where people have started to use kind of that I hate to say video game effect things, but they're very electronic music.
It's a very synthy 80s kind of sound to it.
And I love the 80s. So, you know, things like that really, really affect me. And, you know, when I hear the 16-bit synth stuff used in music, I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm about. I can just imagine, you know, F-Zero or something being on in the background.
Now, am I correct, John? Can you give some more background if you know the band? I think I read something like they're from New Zealand or something.
Aaron, you're asking the wrong person. I don't actually care about the background of bands.
Okay. Well, I just didn't know if anyone. Does anyone know? That's fine.
I don't care about them as people.
To the
Not at all.
Wikipedia mobile. Hold on.
I am a consumer. I just like to listen to
I just thought that was interesting because they did have a unique sound to me. Boom, boom, boom.
Well, you know what? You know,
Yeah.
I was actually thinking of this because I heard this song, and I heard this song when, you know, I still hear it sometimes. I hear it like in restaurants and stuff, which I think once the song is in restaurants, it's now broken through and become like, oh, now this is what I call a mainstream hit these days. you know?
I did choose the most mainstream of their stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You picked a big hit single, and I think when I was listening to it, I was thinking that same exact very synthy, very kind of you know, a lot of drum machine kind of stuff, and I like that kind of thing too. And I was thinking to myself, it's only been within the last, 4 5 years that has come into vogue again.
Yeah.
After the 80s were kind of, you know, what it reminded me of a lot was New Order, and I don't know if you've ever listened to New Order at all, John.
Little bit.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of that. And then, you know, one of my favorite albums from this year was The Bones of What We Believe by Churches. I think that's how you say it. It's Churches spelled with a V.
Yeah, it's the weird.
Churches.
Yeah, Churches. It reminded me a lot of that. Or I should say Churches reminds me a lot of this song because this song is a couple years old now. But I think that's a good thing. I like it. I think it's kind of a broader sonic palette we get on the radio, and maybe it's just symptomatic of the kind of music people are interested in now, which is cool.
Yeah. I think it kind of broke through with Bulletproof. In 2010, that was one of the first like really mainstream songs that used it.
Yeah, well, and you know, you saw little
you go back to
influences of
Beck,
it.
I mean,
Yeah, well, even that sort of synthy sound, as far back as like the Killers. I mean, while we were in college, the Killers they're a rock band first and foremost, but they're bringing in that very synthy, you know, very keyboard pop kind of elements into the music.
Huge Killers fan.
Yeah, I like their first album especially, and it
very self-consciously using the technology though.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, they maybe had a piece of irony to it. But you know, at that time, I remember in college I heard it, and I was like, wow, I haven't heard anything like that. Like that, there's probably no song in the last 20 years that sounded like that because we're just coming off of the whole, you know, grunge, post-grunge, that very heavy kind of. I mean, you know, John, you like.
He's a true synth guy.
I'm sorry.
He's a true synth guy.
Yeah.
Like, he plays as a lead singer. He actually plays the synth.
Yeah.
At the lead.
And so I guess when I heard this song, I was like, wow, it really does. It does harken back to that. I think that's pretty cool.
I actually listened to this first and kind of didn't like the song. And so this is an example of, it grew on me kind of thing. But the
Okay.
one thing that I liked about the song, kind of from the beginning, but especially as I got going, and this is very common in, I think, electronic kind of music, is toward the, I guess it would be a bridge, where it goes to the as it withers, brittle it shakes, can you whisper, and all you've got this big and that's all it is, the simplest thing in the world. But like it's perfect. Like and the
It's an awesome concert song.
right no, and it's the right feel, and I think it's just the kind of thing that no pretension there, simple. I mean, produced very well, and of course with the electric, the people. I don't know if the band is producing themselves or if they have a producer. How this works, but for this group, but it has a great feel. It wasn't just kick snare, and I thought that was to use the word. I thought that was seductive there. As a listener, I think it was
that's actually a really good word for a lot of their music. My favorite of their songs is actually "Punching in a Dream," and that's on the same album, but it's very, very kind of fluid and dreamlike, and that's I think that you have hit it right on the nail. Hit the nail right on the head.
Right, and I think one kind of phrase that maybe they use this in English, like literature type of study too, or any other type of thing. But in music, we talk about text painting a lot, quote unquote text painting, which is like different ways of expressing the text. And whether this is a kind of a super artistic thing or not, it was interesting that the part of the text where it goes, this is after the first chorus, we lie beneath the stars at night. You know what I'm talking about there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then that's where it kind of the percussion kind of drops off and it becomes really airy in kind of outer spacing. So obviously the stars at night in the sky references and so on. If you're someone like me who tends to not even listen to the lyrics most of the time, like I mentioned before, maybe before this, a lot of my favorite songs I don't know half the lyrics, and they're still awesome to me for some reason, right? But I think it's interesting when I first was listening to this, it was just, they decided to change it up. But I think you can see with the text there is something being painted there, if you will. With
Right,
the
they go more minimalist when they're talking about an area where you're supposed to be looking in the sky. So it's kind of like the night sky is kind of dark and quiet and
right.
And so I mean, light.
So anyway, I thought that was kind of I noticed that, and I wasn't sure. Obviously, you can be really corny with that, and a lot of bands have done that. But I thought it kind of worked, maybe because it wasn't so obvious. It just kind of happened, and it was felt appropriate without knowing the lyrics, and then with them there, it was subtle enough.
Yeah, so often those breaks where you kind of remove the instruments and you have the percussion going, those are kind of used as like, to get the crowd pumped up kind of thing. And that was one that almost seems to kind of pull the song back in and make it a little more intimate. And I think that's a really cool quality. One thing I really liked the vocals of the song. The vocal performance. I'm trying to get the lead singer here. I was a big fan of it. I don't know if it's just how that, again, a lot of this with electronic music, a lot of it goes on, is based on production and stuff like that.
I've been told, because I've never seen them in concert, but I've been told that they're pretty much on par.
Okay.
Which is good. I mean, the Killers are literally on par. I mean, they actually sometimes sound better in concert.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question for you all. I don't listen to enough of this music, and maybe John in particular. But it seems like the European influence, and maybe just the more broadly understood, like just international influence of pop, international influence on pop, has this tendency towards electronic sounds.
I think so. To me, it's a sound, the very heavy, very, very techno Euro pop kind of stuff. Like, to me, I associate that very strongly with when I was at high school and I was living in West Africa with a lot of French influence, I that was the kind of stuff, and I'm thinking like, Boo by Eiffel 65 is, I mean, that's an awfully stupid song, but that sound is very much when I think of that European influence. That's the kind of thing I think of.
A more recent influential French album would be Wolfgang Amadeus.
Phoenix.
Yeah, Phoenix. So that had, you can sort of see an evolution there where
Phoenix
I think
is awesome.
Phoenix.
Yeah,
had
or
some
even, I mean, if we're talking other French
influence
musicians,
here.
even Daft Punk.
Yeah, although I'm not a
Well,
huge
Daft Punk and
guy.
Massive Attack too. Also
Yeah.
sort of straddling that line between
Hmm.
of more electronic and rock sound. So yeah, I think you're right, Aaron. There's a lot of European influence there in terms of adding more electronic elements into
It's also very accessible.
straightforward pop.
Yeah, it is.
It's very accessible, and it's also, if you only have, like, a lot of these bands will go to the extremes. They'll either have only 2 members and lots of production in synth.
Like Nine Inch
or-
Nails.
Yeah.
It's Trent Reznor and no one else.
Or they'll have a ton of members like Arcade Fire. And use just the synth and things like that to just add to their genre.
I'm sure we'll have, in the course of these conversations, we'll have a lot of time to talk about Arcade Fire because I think at least 3 of us are obsessed with them. But
I've loved them incessantly since 2005 when I saw them at Lollapalooza.
yeah, but they almost have this quality of being a full-on orchestra.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean,
And
they're
they
so
all play the instruments. They
Yeah.
just rotate in concert.
it's like an
insane
army
to watch. Mid-song.
Yeah.
That's the most amazing thing. Mid-song,
Yeah.
they just change instruments.
One interesting juxtaposition between the 2 songs, Youngblood and Goodnight Rose. If you close your eyes and imagine what setting does this music fit. There are multiple settings. Maybe you imagine 2 or 3 of them for each. I definitely think Goodnight Rose is much more centered in United States culture, and where this is again with my argument for the international sound, feels like it could be. This is maybe the global age music feel. It feels like this is some club or something that is very international. You imagine looking around and seeing people of, all different stripes or something, where it feels like Goodnight Rose is a bonding of Americans coming together in their Americanness or something.
See, I kind of found Goodnight Rose to be something that maybe was like out west.
Okay.
And I felt I did not get the international vibe. I know that's maybe this just my indifference. I always thought of this one, Youngblood, as, and this is going to sound weird, but like teenagers in a park laying under the stars in the grass. It's they're talking about, like, they use even terminology in there, the cross, the promises and hope to die, like the cross my heart, hope to die, that kind of, youthful terminology. So I'm thinking like high schoolers holding hands, and then that's the kind of feeling that I got.
Yeah, John, I'm not sure
And
if
even
I
the
would
title, Young Blood.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd specifically tie it to any region as such. I think broadly, I think of more electronic influences as being a little more European, but I think that's really broad, I think. But I agree, John, is that there's a very kind of youthful there's a very youthful kind of thing to the album, to the song, excuse me, and it's almost, it talks about not being naive and everything. I think that's appropriate, because I thought the lyrics have a slight naive spin to them, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I don't mean that dismissively, but it does kind of have this a very youthful kind of approach to it.
Well, the forced rhyming and things like that.
Sure.
The timing is very even, and
I was listening to it again this evening with headphones on, and I definitely liked it a lot better with headphones. There's more texture to it, which I appreciated. But the thing I kept thinking of was it just feels very airy, and not in a bad way, but in just you just kind of go with it. It's just untethered, and you just kind of listen to it, and you just kind of get washed away in it.
Has like that soaring quality to it.
Yeah, like a soaring, airy. Just kind of drifted away, which is nice. It's not something that I like to listen to all the time, but it's different, and it does. If that's what they're going for, they do it very well, because, like you said, John, it's very accessible and you can keep listening to it. Whereas a lot of times I think music that shoots for that sort of airy quality maybe just comes off as repetitious or
angels and airwaves and things like that.
Yeah, just sort of leaves you afterwards. Whereas this song, I generally am like, bobbing along afterwards, and
right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, maybe we can hit back on some of these. Maybe let's. What do we think? Fleet Foxes or Porcupine Tree?
Let's go Porcupine Tree.
Let's do it.
Porcupine Tree.
Do it.
Let's stick
Shallow. So I guess I kind of chose this song. There's several layers to why I chose this song, I guess. One is Porcupine Tree is kind of a band I discovered when I was kind of looking for more progressive rock / metal groups to listen to, which is just one thing that's, if you're in if you know the world of progressive rock and stuff, what part of what you do is look for more bands, to be able to kind of quote and stuff like that into other music. So that's what you do.
Shore up your street cred.
Right, there's a little bit of that, but I would always find myself, especially with the metal scene, I like a lot of progressive metal, but at some level, I don't like that much screaming usually, and so I like it, but I don't want it to be most of the time. And a lot of progressive metal is most of the time, and so this band kind of isn't quite metal, and they kind of fall in that group. And so anyway, I started liking them a lot, and they have an incredible drummer, partly because I'm very interested in drummers, Gavin Harrison. He's just an all-around great musician and so on. But so all this talk about great musicians, but this is definitely this kind of band is a band for, stereotypically a band for musicians, so to speak. So they're trying to do various different things to appeal to that. And so I think this drew me in a little bit that way, but also because I genuinely like the songwriting and just the.
I'm not surprised in that, because it sounded a lot like something that you would have written.
I was going to say, for those of you who are listening for the first time, band in college, and this sounds a lot like a song he would have written.
Yes,
even the lyrics form and like the style was shattered to a T.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Aaron, on that same note, we were talking about how our tastes have shifted, and that's true of all of us. But this is the one that mapped the closest to what I think Aaron's style of music is.
Right. Wait till next week.
Yeah, and and I think what you said, I liked it.
If
I heard this, I'd never heard of Porcupine Tree until we heard this song, and so when I was listening to it, I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. It's a really brawny riff to it. It's not. I think if we're talking about the evolution of our tastes, this is not really where I am anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I couldn't appreciate it, kind of thing, but it's just I don't listen to a lot of really heavy riffs kind of stuff as much anymore.
Right.
And so I was listening to it, and I was like, but I like how I like the vocals a lot. They're not, I don't want to say delicacy, but they don't go for the kind of like that kind of stereotypical growl, like you get something like someone like Metallica, but does that a lot. It doesn't have.
This isn't a game about who's more manly at the vocals. Or
yeah, it's not this sort of testosterone fueled grunt to the vocal, and I like that. I like that quality a lot. And I mean, the riff was fun. I mean, it's riffs are kind of like a little like candy for me, where it's like it's fun to hear a couple good ones on an album, and I start getting a little tired of them,
Right.
If I get a whole album of that, I start getting a little worn out.
Aaron and I love our riffs. We love our collective soul.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to hear everyone's comments, but I did feel like this one has a collective soul kind of quality to it.
I thought of the same
way
thing.
It kind of was framed, opening with a kind of riff that feels like Collective Soul might have used it, and then ends exactly like Collective Soul would do with the riff again, and we close it off with an accent in the end and stuff like that, which is a lot of heavy rock anyway. But anyway,
certainly the more radio-friendly heavy rock feels that way at least.
Yeah. But I want to hear some more before I throw some other ideas out there. But
I'll go. I listened to this and I liked it fine, but mostly I'm just like nothing about this would ever stand out to me. Like I would hear it and think, okay, but I would never like pursue more of the music or more. So I'm just interested to know like what, and you kind of talked about it already, but like what it is about this song in particular that stands out to you as, someone who studies music theory, but then also someone who is very much into this genre and knows a lot about it. Like, what is it about this song in particular that does stand out to you? Because I hear it and I just, I like the kind of interlude, like in the piano editions, and it has that nice contrast that livens it up. And and mostly, I think what I would say is it's fine, but it doesn't stand out to me. So I'm mostly just curious to know, like, why does it stand out for you, and what what catches your attention about it?
Yeah, I think I'll just go ahead and answer some of that. I mean, I think the progressive rock nerd in me and the music nerd in me would say, well, it's all about the opening riff and the fake out. I don't know if anyone was faked out by the opening riff, or if that's like not something. So the fake out in the opening riff.
Maybe I didn't know I was being faked out.
Yeah, maybe they got me and I didn't even know it.
Don't realize, yeah. No, but let me play something. And I'm not going to go all analytical here, but just to get the idea here. Okay, we'll stop there. Now, I know it hasn't even begun, so no one's faked out there. But like the normal listener, when I listen to this, and I think stylistically, you hear that right, as what musicians or theorists would call a pickup or an anacrusis, they would say, if you want to be technical, but like a and begin kind of thing. And that's how it would be normally riffed on in most riff rock music, okay? And so what's interesting is then they bring in the drums, and it turns out that slide guitar down to the beginning, what sounds like the beginning of a riff, is actually the beginning of the riff. So that it's, instead of it being and one, it's 1, 2. So da 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 da. So if that makes sense, so you go in with certain expectations of where the beginning of the riff is, meaning not the very beginning, but there's like, imagine, the hymn Amazing Grace, obviously. So Amazing Grace begins with a pickup. Amaze, right? Amaze. So what we thought, the analogy would be, what we thought was the is actually the downbeat, is actually where amazing is. And so there's kind of a little bit of a fake out there, and this might be something, I'm not exactly sure, that's more of a guitar player's thing or something, or a band's thing, but you listen to that, and this is a classic way, this is a thing Metallica did, everyone does this, you begin a song, Collective Soul, obviously, great riff rock type of stuff, where you begin with just the guitar, and you just kind of lay out the riff, and then you bring in the drum.
I expected voice box music after that, like the, like Candlebox or something, into like as the music, something or Foo Fighters, where he uses the voice box. That's what I expected.
Oh, really?
When I heard the first couple riffs, I'm like, oh, this is going to be one of those that's going to have a voice box or something.
You know, Aaron, it's funny you're talking about that fake out, and I forget the technical term you used, but I was in the car and I was listening. This is not some of my cool music, but I was listening to Bare Naked Ladies of all people, and their song "Sound of Your Voice," and the song opens with just a normal guitar part, but and then the drums kick in the rhythm section, and every time I hear the guitar part and then it kicks into the rhythm, the song is in 6/8, and when I hear the guitar part, my mind can't hear the rhythm until it kicks in.
Right. So that's what this is.
And I don't know if that's the same kind of thing. If it is, I've heard that concept in other songs, and I've never been able to give voice to it. In that particular song, in Sound of Your Voice, I've listened to the song 6-7 years now. I've never been able to figure out how to anticipate how the beat's going to sound. Like if I hear that guitar part, I cannot hum the beat along with it, because I can't hear it until it actually hits, which is really weird and surprisingly nuanced for someone like Bare Naked Lady. But there it is.
No, actually, Bare Naked Ladies is a pretty relatively sophisticated group, actually, musically, I think.
We're gonna have to come back to that discussion at some point, because.
Relatively, but I mean, what I was going to say is there are two. I don't want to go all heavy on the theory, so let me know. I'm not trying. I'm not making this a music theory discussion, but this song just struck me that way a little bit. There's a couple kinds. That fake out you were talking about. It sounds like, I'll have to look it up, a different type of fake out, and there are two types that I imagine. There's one where you listen.
It's like the crossover in like a pump fake and a crossover, two different sports.
Well, I don't know what the perfect analogy would be, but
Tom Brady.
It's exactly like that.
There's two different kinds. There's the you listen to some notes, some notes, and in your mind you want to group them a certain way according to certain strategies you've learned through other listening. And that's normal. We all do that automatically. We nod to the music a certain way, just because we've learned we've kind of pick up on these signals, and we group the notes that are there into certain groups in our mind, kind of pre-consciously, maybe just before we're just doing it automatically almost. And what you're talking about seems to be that different ways of grouping it, not where's the beginning, but what notes belong where in what relationship. So 6/8 versus 4/4, or versus 3/4 or something. So a different meter, meaning like 1 and 2 and 3 or 1 and 2 and they're all underlying pulses. We could all group them differently, but that's one type. This type is one where the music's all there and we're all nodding to the same thing. We just don't know where the beginning is. We know where the beats are. We just don't know where the beginning of the larger group is. And so that's kind of a different one. But that's kind of, to me, this is kind of to go back, get rid of the theory. This is kind of, I feel like a pop, not a pop track, but like a single type of track for Porcupine Tree.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I just having never heard of them, I did a little bit of research, and if I'd heard this song and then you'd ask me to, classify it, which is kind of a futile job sometimes, but I would never have classified it as prog rock ever.
Right.
And so and then I say, oh, they're considered a prog rock group, and then I see, oh, they have songs, or they have albums that are entirely composed of multi-song suites, with 12-minute, and all these, solos and all that kind of stuff. And so I thought to myself, I bet, I didn't get a chance to explore this really, but I bet this isn't actually a very typical song from them. Or if it is, this is not necessarily a representative song of how they always are.
When I kind of read this song on this album, and I know the whole album, so it's a little different, but in their music generally, this is a song that's like a nod to straight up rock, and they're just going to do their little things here and there to like kind of wink, wink, hey, we're a prog band. And I feel like this opening is that. It's like, hey, this is ordinary riff rock. And then, oh, gotcha, the beginning actually is where you thought was the pickup, And then we all get it, and the joke's over, but it's only, that's
or we
the
don't
kind
get
of...
it.
I like that. I like that we're calling it a joke now.
Well, and again,
I get it now.
It's an extremely broad definition of a joke.
okay. But that's like it's ordinary
Music theory
riff rock.
people.
Yeah.
It's just approached differently. If this was Collective Soul, they wouldn't have done that. They would have played the riff, and they would have treated what sounds like a pickup as a pickup.
So what you're saying is Porcupine Tree is making fun of Collective Soul.
No. They're
Guys, you know who's going to love this
Those
joke?
are fighting words.
Music
totally
theory
embracing
majors.
Collective Soul. Did anyone notice at the end where the riff normally is like a slow like that? At the end they kind of go the boom and they just kind of double time that. Let me just play an excerpt real quick and then I'll stop going on that.
I actually did notice that, I only noticed it when I was listening to it just before we were getting ready to record here. I said, oh, it went to double time at the end there, and I thought that was pretty cool. I've heard, again, I think I'm a little closer to Ryan in the feeling that, this probably wouldn't make me sit down and I'm going to keep on listening to these guys, but I think that's more a product of me than the actual quality, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's all a taste thing, and that's fine. I don't think anyone.
One thing I kind of want to go back to is that you talk about the joke's over, and like for you and people, probably most prog rock listeners, they would get it. They would know what they're listening to, especially with prog rock, because the listeners that I have encountered of that genre seem to be very keyed into the technical aspects of it, and that usually seems to be like what they really dig into. But I mean, all of the songs that we've picked all kind of speak to their own genres in a special way and in a different way, Right. And when we talk about our songs, they each have their context and their background that goes with it. That kind of goes back to what I'm interested in. This is to learn more about what that context is. And when you talk about genre, you talk about what the expectation is. So, you have this expectation that the prog rock is going to do certain things. And now when I listen to that style of music later on, I might know what to listen for now, and I would think, oh, I get that, I see what you're doing. Whereas before it would just
right. Well, I think when I listen to it, and I'll back off on this, at the end, what I meant with the double time was not that it's cool, not that it's like a prog thing to do. It's like a very ordinary thing to do. It's like a rock it out thing to do, which is awesome, and it's probably the best part of the song. It's like, we just kind of get to straight up enjoy. It's like a Foo Fighters rock it out moment or something. Or it actually kind of sounds like, what was the group that the guitar player from Guns N' Roses Slash?
Velvet Revolver.
Yeah. It sounded like Velvet Revolver.
It did sound like Velvet Revolver. I mean, say that, yeah.
But like at the end, and I was just like, and to me, it was kind of, this song was just, at some level, just wanted to explore and consciously live in these kind of rock it out styles with a few wink winks along the way. But I feel like it makes you wonder, like, I think if you were just off the street and listening to this song and you didn't think this is a prog band, you would just say, oh, this is an ordinary rock song. And so I think when I think about Porcupine Tree, I don't think it's anything special. I just think, what are they thinking when they're playing this? I feel like that some of this is like they need an escape from the oppression or the need to be progressive, Mm-hmm. And so doing the just rock it out thing, which is awesome, is an outlet for that. So I feel like the song does a lot of that.
So it's like it breaks a lot of the established rules that the band has set for themselves, or at least the perceived rules. Maybe they're not explicit rules. But it's interesting you said that. That's one, I think, when the White Stripes were still together, that was one strength they had, is they set these or at least Jack White, set these boundaries for what the group would do, and then he spent 7 or 8 years pushing against those boundaries and kind of almost breaking those rules, you
Mhm.
know, and stretching to see how that paradigm would be shifted within itself. And so I think that's a really fascinating way to look, and that's not anything. I mean, you say, oh, this got a little technical, and maybe so, but that's nothing I would have ever gotten just by listening to it, ever.
Right.
The only, this is gonna sound like it's a huge slam on the song. The only negative thing that I can really say, because I enjoyed the song, is I would have enjoyed it more if I had not gotten the lyrics, because I just thought the lyrics were horrible.
Oh, I was curious. Tell me about what you all thought of the lyrics, because
I would have enjoyed the song more if I had no idea what the words were saying.
is
and I
this
just
like
would have gone with the
you
groove.
would have enjoyed it more because this is like bad lyrics?
They have
I'm
a
not
very
offended
dramatic
by the
teenage
lyrics,
girl
other than
quality to
I
them.
don't think it's a very well written song.
I see. Okay, yeah, go ahead. I'm curious what you have to say.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, they have a lot of, it uses imageries of like, scissors and cutting and knives and stuff like that, which has sort of a, I don't know, John, I'm a little inclined to agree. I don't know, they just had a very kind of,
It's perfunctory.
a very generic sort of teenager poetry to it, and I
Well,
don't think that's really a problem, because I think the
I
way
think that's a
Aaron
prog
says how
rock
he's
problem,
listening to it,
actually.
yeah, how Aaron's listening to it is not really respective to the lyrics, and that's fine. I almost wonder if that's.
interesting.
Go ahead.
So I was curious too, because like, for instance, scissors cutting out your anger is like the most. It's like, good job, buddy. But
Yeah.
I do think this is,
Well done.
like, way to go. We have to have something to cut with, right? I don't think that. I mean, I do think this is more, and again, this is my experience with the progressive metal culture, is there tends to be people, I think, like, for instance, that, which sounds really generic, I think is more of a reference to people who cut themselves.
I was wondering that as well.
So
if it had some kind of reference to self-mutilation.
Yeah, I think it's a self-mutilation, and ignore the splinter, for instance, reference. But
Yeah.
Although I'd say that there's lots of different ways to approach that,
Sure.
and you can still have good writing, even when the subject matter is just abhorrent. I mean, you look at My Chemical Romance, and they're a very dark band. They deal with mental illness and cutting and things like that, and death on a regular basis. But their lyrics are witty and well written and timed, and I felt like I liked the analogy of like a high school poetry.
Yeah.
Trying a little bit too hard to be abstract.
I don't know if I agree with the trying too hard. It more struck me as like, oh man, we wrote this bitch and riffed. Oh, we better put some words to this.
Gotcha.
Oh crap. So like,
definitely,
like, we gotta fill in the blanks here. Something.
They literally found the high schoolers.
Gasoline. That's a good one. Which again, like Nate said, that's fine for what it's trying to do. It's trying to rock. And when you're like trying to rock out, you just want words. It doesn't really matter necessarily what they are. Now, I think a decent song can be made awesome with really great lyrics that make you go, I see what you did,
Yeah.
But it's not necessary all the time. So
right, it's not.
But
you
I see
can have
what you're
some
saying.
music that's like the same thing over and over and over, and it's ridiculously dull, but it still is like, oh my gosh, I love this.
There is a tendency, Ryan, this is exactly true, especially in metal, to like say, we've got this awesome riff, now what? I mean, clearly that is how a lot of songs are written. Probably over half of them. Probably 75%. Not kidding.
In the singer-songwriter genre is the exact opposite.
Exact opposite. So we're
you
so
write poetry, and then you're like,
very different here. For instance,
I enjoyed the song the first time I listened to it
more
than when I went back and listened to it and I was reading the lyrics along.
It's almost like you're disappointed. Like, oh, I'm sure there's some good lyrics back there. Oh, wait.
Yeah. Again, I
wrong.
liked the music aspect of the song.
Right.
because you're right, it harkens to some of the music I used to like a ton, and I definitely could see your musical style from Shattered in there, and I really was a big fan, not just because I'm your brother, but I actually liked the music. I'm still a little bit ticked off that you didn't go a little bit more with Twist and some of those other, but well, that's a completely different discussion.
The fact you remember it, though, is flattering.
Yes. I still have the CD, the burned CD, in my stuff, and I pull it out.
Wait, are you referencing Aaron's previous musical endeavors?
Yes.
Yes. Shattered.
Yes. Shattered.
Maybe I'll put a snippet or put the whole album right in between this segment.
You should. You can. I bet this is just a big ruse to get
to
album
market
sales.
Shattered.
Viral marketing, you got us.
Where's Cameron?
I was raised up believing I was somehow unique, like a snowflake, distinct among snowflakes, unique in each way you'd conceive. And now after some thinking, I'd say I'd rather be a functioning cog in some great machinery, serving something beyond me. But I don't know what that will be. I'll get back to you someday soon. You will see.
I think this is a good segue to the lyrics, the question of that, to the Helplessness Blues, because
Awesome lyrics.
when I listened to this, I listened to the lyrics and I heard the music. I heard it all at once. So, Nate, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I actually Ryan introduced this song to me. Ryan Fleet Foxes is actually from Seattle, and so Ryan, when this is from their second album, also called Helplessness Blues, and Ryan said, "Oh, dude, this album's so good, you gotta listen to it." So I got it, and when I got the album, it was what I say was my midlife crisis at 28, which sounds like a ludicrous thing to do, but it was not long after I'd had my first son. Professionally, at my job, it was really, really bad time. I actually that year was eventually let go, was downsized, and so I kind of associate that time of my life very strongly with that song. And the whole album uses this imagery of that sort of aimlessness you hit at about 25, 30. That I think a lot of us, even if you get married and you have a pretty stable life, there's this sort of, boy, is this what I signed on for kind of feeling. The very first, not the song we listened to, but the very first song on the album is called Montezuma, and the very first line is, "So now I'm older than my mother and father when they had their daughter. What does that say about me?" And I think now, like I said, I just had our first kid, but I didn't have that particular kind of angst, but this feeling of, boy, I am stuck. And when I got that particular song, there's a couple of ways. When I first heard it, what I really liked about it, and I think you're right. I think it's one of those perfect storms of a really great lyric with really lovely music, and kind of how it all dovetails together. This is my favorite track in the album, and that idea of, when you're told, I mean, this is kind of what Fight Club is about, right? You're told that you're unique and you have something special to offer, and there's a point when you're like, yeah, but I just need to be doing something. I need to be in something here, and I have to. And even if it's not something glamorous or something special or snowflakey for me, I just have to be in something and feel like I'm contributing. And that was something. I mean, to get very personal, that's something I was really struggling with at the time. And so, and then I really like the last, when you get to the bridge, if I had an orchard, I'd work till I'm sore, and just that idea of, there's two things I like about it. One, it's kind of a lovely image, that sort of desire to get back to like a simplicity, and to work with my hands, and I'm not, I mean, you guys know me, I'm not a hands-on manual labor kind of guy. I'm not naturally like that, but when I heard that, I saw the appeal of it. The other thing I liked about it was there's a sort of like aspirational flight of fantasy feel to it that frankly isn't very healthy. This kind of if I had this, I'd do that, which is that's idle chatter, right? I mean, that's not how you get out of these funks in your life, is by imagining what you'd do if things were different.
Okay.
The other thing I found out, and this is actually something I only really picked up on when I was reading the lyrics, because even though I know the song really well, I read the lyrics while I was doing this. I also picked up there's clearly a you in the song. There's the singer, but there's someone he's singing to. So there's another part involved in there somewhere, and there's this sort of thirst not only for this belonging, but this connection that comes with it. And I thought that was really fascinating, like trying to find meaning in someone else beside you, while at the same time you're trying to find meaning beyond that. And just trying to find that purpose within that relationship. And I'd never really picked up on that, and I think that's a little more subtle. And then, of course, I mean, musically the song is lovely. It's a really, that kind of folksy sound is really great. But what I really love about it, and where Fleet Foxes I think really shines, are those harmonies. My wife sounds like the Beach Boys, and it does sound like the Beach Boys to me, in a very Bronson, very sunny kind of harmony. They're really good at crafting really, really lovely, musical, scenes without it feeling processed. Because when you start using, like, they use a lot of like weird instruments, like, oh, we use a glockenspiel in this song for some reason, which is kind of a cutesy, gimmicky way to do indie music. And I think that in this case they're able to do it without it ever sounding trifling, without it sounding, that kind of twee, cutesy feel to it. And so I think that's what have really, and that's why they've stuck around with me. This album is still one of my favorites. We may actually end up talking about the whole thing at some point. I don't know. So that's kind of where I came from with this song.
Yeah, when I heard the lyrics, if I had an orchard, I'd work till I'm raw, I work till I'm sore. I kind of took that as, well, if I could find a purpose, I would work really hard, but
yeah,
I haven't been given any sort of actual purpose, so that's kind of what I read into it.
Yeah, and in that there's a kind of deflection to it, where this isn't my fault.
Exactly.
I think
it's not my fault. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, and I think that that we talk about, that's a very selfish attitude, and I think we have all struggled with that at some point. I know I have, but I think what's really fascinating about that is that it's really prevalent, especially around our age, who are just about 30, starting families, maybe getting married, and so I think that's why it's so resonant, because we've seen it in ourselves.
Yeah, and I read the lyrics as if he was talking to a significant other. That's how I read it, that he's talking and trying to explain this helplessness feeling that he's having. But at least there's the section right before that, what good is it to sing helplessness blues? Why should I wait for anyone else? That's at least a self-aware section in it.
Yeah, well, and I think it's probably about that struggle of helplessness. It's called Helplessness Blues, right? It's about that feeling of helplessness you get at the midlife crisis at age 28, And so I think that because it pulls it both ways, I think that's what makes it's that this is. Ryan, our drama professor Dan Baer would say that drama is found in contrast, and it's true that at least in this kind of setting, it's pulling in both directions and can't resolve in either way, really honestly, and so it just kind of leaves it hanging there ambiguous, and I think that's really appropriate and really and very, very honest emotionally.
Yeah, I think along with that, there's a desire. I think that those opening lyrics are really, really set a different tone for a lot of this kind of music that is maybe sort of reflecting a wider shift in our generation, especially, of moving away from individualism and more into a collectivist mindset. I don't really care about being a special snowflake. I want to be part of something bigger. And so you have that contrasted with, but then I also want to go into this orchard and be by myself. So it's like this pulling away from what you have been taught your whole life, that you're a special snowflake, you're an American, you can do it on, at least in our own cultural milieu, if you want to use that word. So, it's pulling away from that individualism wanting maybe something that is more collectivist or more communal, but not finding it in any of the examples that have kind of been given. So you walk through the I don't want to be part of religion, or whatever examples he gives. I don't have the lyrics right in front of me. So yeah, like you said, I think it's that contrast between the choice we've been presented since we were from what we were raised with to what maybe we're seeing as another option, but not really knowing how to do that, how to go forward. So I think it's a really compelling ambiguity there.
I have a lot of thoughts on the lyrics as well, but I thought I would give us just a musical thought here with the text. Again, I put a little squiggle there in our text just because of that obvious section break after the third refrain, where it goes right before the "If I Had an Orchard" part.
The whole back half of the song.
The whole back half of the song changes, and it floats, and it kind of feels like a dream there. And it's in music. Again, it's almost like what they might call a temporal trip, which we can say is a way of like changing scenery mid-music. So you can imagine a song going on, and then everything changes. Like imagine this is an opera or something, and then if I had an orchard, I'd work till I'm raw. This is a dream. This is in the middle of something that's going on. It seems to me, and then the you there changes. I feel. And so we had a question of the you, and you would wait tables and soon run the store, and this feels like a significant other here for sure. The other you feels like it might be that same significant other, but it's also the whole of the culture who demands we know what we're doing. I'll get back to you, so the general you. I'll get back to you when I know what I'm doing. Or
it could be parents.
It could be parents. It's just this general feeling, it seems, that might include an actual person, maybe a significant other, but this general, I'll get back to you, I don't know what I'm doing yet. But even when there's no one around, the sense that is inside of you, that you've internalized, that I should be doing something with my life meaningful, and yet, and so I feel like the you becomes very positive. Obviously the line, gold hair in the sunlight, my light in the dawn, all that's very dreamy and idealistic and is an escape. But I guess I would read that as
well, it's like a movie.
Yeah,
he's talking about someday I'll be like the man on the screen.
I love how the song ends on that note, because it's that sort of ambiguous. It's a very aspirational kind of American dream. There's a real emptiness to that line. And after kind of the introspection of the rest of the song, there's almost kind of a sad kind of surrender there at the end. And I don't think that's necessarily it's not the full stop on the song necessarily, but it's a very kind of bleak note to end on, I think.
It's almost like a resignation to like romanticizing, like that's what I think of in that whole ending is just romanticizing that lifestyle and not really worrying about the details of it, because I think that's another tendency of our generation, is to romanticize that kind of lifestyle, because of also that we've grown up in such a technologically advanced age from our previous generations, so we think of, if we could just return to being in an orchard, it'd be so great and all our problems would be taken care of. So it's almost like I can't really figure out what to do, so
and we're constantly,
like you're saying with the dream,
we're constantly putting on a show, even with like social media, with Facebook.
Right.
People are writing what they want people to see, how they want people to perceive them, and trying to add significance to their life via that. Instead of actually maybe sometimes going out and doing something. In a way, we kind of are creating our own film. Even if it's not really a film, it's just, social media and things like that.
Aaron, you said you had some thoughts on the lyrics as well. I'm curious to hear those.
Yeah, I was struck by the phrase right at the beginning. I think it frames the whole thing. I was raised up believing. Right there. You don't even have to go on. right? You do ultimately, but like right there, I think that resonates with people these days. I think there's it's a that it almost is a signal for this major cultural change that technology has helped bring along. That the I think the world changing so fast, we don't have a lot of examples of how to deal with a world changing so fast because our parents or our grandparents especially did not have the internet and did not have college as just high school extended and master's degree as just kind of like a et cetera, and like and so I think the raised up believing feels like a way, just the way it's said feels like it's recognizing not just whatever specifics he's alluding to, the words are alluding to here, but like just this general sense of it's not like it used to be.
Right. Well, and then the opening line of the second stanza is that, and now after some thinking. So you could say, I was raised up believing, insert whatever you want, and now after some thinking.
Right.
Yeah. There's this whole sense of, when seeing, we all have little kids at home, so we see this. We see our kids try and define themselves through us to some extent. I mean, that's how tonight Forrest was telling me, this is my oldest, he was telling me that he wanted me to do something because he was sad. And I had to explain, it was like, I can't make you not be sad, which is kind of a tough thing for him to understand, and I'm not sure he actually understood it. And maybe it makes me sound like kind of a heartless dad, but that's the truth. I mean, he pulls this a lot every night, and if this is something, he's going to have to figure out at some point that we have things that we exist, we exist apart from what our parents do, and so we're raised up believing something, and then at some point there's a realization of, but that's not, because I was raised up believing it, that's not necessarily a good reason to keep on believing it, and I think that's, it might not be, and we talk about extended adolescence, or I should say they talk about extended adolescence, and how it extends into the 20s and the 30s, and maybe this is kind of the thing that we're only just, I mean, I don't remember ever consciously dealing with that, but maybe it's another one of these generational things where we're just kind of like, oh wow, my parents raised me this way, but I'm doing this. So I don't know, there's a lot of ways it could go.
I guess, and I guess the raised up believing, obviously it means the specific thing there. I just think it maybe resonates more. For some reason, and maybe this is what every generation says, it feels like this sounds more like a song of this age than it would have 20 years ago.
I agree.
For some reason.
I don't know. I think this could fit in the 70s.
Yeah. Well, and maybe this is just how we view generations now. We don't have, we didn't name generations until, the baby boomers. They felt their own separation from their families, and Generation X and Y, and then whatever the heck we are. I think what they call us millennials, right? That's a very recent thing, just in the last 60 years or so, to name generations and to kind of mark them off in popular culture kind of sense, at least as far as I know. Although, I mean, not that I say that, I think back to, like, what is it, in World War I, they refer to that as the Lost Generation, just because so many of them died fighting the war.
The Greatest Generation.
The Greatest Generation is basically up through 1955.
Yeah, and so maybe it's just a 20th century tendency to kind of, because we spend this much time naming generations, that immediately draws attention to the fact that it is different from the previous one, and it'll have to figure out what it's going to be like. Well, really, I mean, it's not like the generation is doing this consciously. It's just it happens naturally. It's an organic process, but it's a narrative we like to impose on the whole thing.
But I think it is becoming, and again, this is from my perspective, but it seems like would we all agree the technology is rapidly changing in a way that it never has before.
Certainly not
Because
on
the
the
exchange
scale.
of ideas is accelerated.
I
So
mean,
when-
it's as important as the printing press and happening exponentially faster.
Right, and so like I feel like the cultural shift, going from our grandparents to our parents was a major shift, but the major shifts are happening all the time. It's almost like this, if you want to take the global warming idea of constantly changing climates back and forth or whatever, or I don't really know all the science on this, but the idea that we're having lots of swings of things.
Well, it's even weird when I think about my son has never lived in a world where most computers aren't touchscreen. Actually, he tries to, I mean, I'm using my laptop right now. He tries to use my laptop by touching the screen, and he's a little baffled that it doesn't work.
Yeah, my daughter just figured out how to use a mouse because
Yeah.
she grew
Yeah,
up
no.
using an iPad.
That's a good point, and that brings me back to kind of what with the song of being trapped between two mindsets that I think is particular to our generation because we're of an age that we remember life before the internet very clearly and life before all of this amazing technology very clearly. And it's not that long ago, it was 10 years ago that thinking about this conversation right now would have blown our minds because video chat was so hard to do reliably and well, cheaply, so all these things. So, in this song, I think it's reflected of this very large gap between my parents' generation and my generation, and I think that's part of what drives that ambiguity of, but seeing one side and the other and kind of having your feet in both at the same time. I don't know.
The one that the line that sticks out to me is, "What's my name? What's my station? Or just tell me what I should do." There's a sense, and maybe this is a product of a social networking kind of thing, where you see your friends and you think, "Wow, they have it together. What's my problem?" And we've all felt that at some point. Like, "Wow, he's doing really well. What am I doing? What's my deal?" And then you feel like this sort of, I get this sort of like guilt almost forming that you haven't found your special purpose, to use the phraseology from The Jerk. You haven't found, I haven't found this thing that drives me, and I was like, oh man, and what's wrong with me? And if you can't come up with that, you're like, someone just has to tell me what tell me what this is. And rather than, we talked about it being a little bit like this sort of, generational laziness to it, but I think there's this real sense of like, I don't know how to do that. Most people don't know how to do that because most people don't consciously do that. But now we have this feeling where we feel like we should consciously do it. We should try and experiment. That's what high school is about, right? You find you try on different kind of personas almost in high school, thinking about, well, how does this fit? And you hang out with weird people that in hindsight, why did I hang out with that person? But it's because you had this little time when you're like, oh, I was going through this phase or that phase or whatever.
And then you're stuck hanging out with Nate for a long time.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Well, I think one thing that's interesting is he says, after some thinking, I'd rather be a functioning cog in some great machinery, serving something beyond me. But I don't know what that will be. I'll get back to you someday soon, you'll see. And it's interesting that, not too long ago, you might not have said that. The word, like we mentioned this before, it would have been all about freedom or something like that. But you just would have been. You wouldn't have had to desire to be a functioning cog. You just kind of would have been, and you wouldn't just. I don't know what that'll be. I'll get back to you. No, sorry, I'll get back to you. Sorry, you are this Protestant, this job, this whatever. It wasn't that cut and dry, but more or less, much more things were already decided. You didn't have this problem of feeling of not being in a place and wanting to be a functional cog, but I'm not sure where because I have all these options that society is giving me, but I'm not sure where that'll be. Maybe I want to be a Catholic, maybe I want to be a Muslim, or whatever it would be. Whatever, I don't know what.
Yeah. Well, and what's really what were the real. I think this is the helplessness and helplessness blues. Is you feel like there's a certain timing you have to have on that, because if you don't have it by a certain time, you're never going to get there. Just that real sense of like, I mean, you guys know me. I did a lot of plays and stuff in college, and I thought, oh, it'd be cool to do that kind of thing. But I'm like, well, I didn't. It's too late now. I have a family. I can't go every night and do practice and stuff that's not an option to me anymore. And I don't really regret that. I mean, honestly, it's not a loss, truthfully, but it is like this. I mean, you feel that way about every kind of thing. Like I enjoy that, but it's too late now, And so there's this sort of almost desperation that sets into that. And I think that's where that helplessness comes, because you're like, wow, I'm realizing this stuff too late.
It's like that moment when you're watching professional sports and you think, I'm never going to be able to do that on any level. And most of these guys who are now my heroes are younger than me by a wide margin.
I remember the first time I realized the Heisman Trophy winner was younger than me.
Yeah, it's kind
that was surreal.
Yeah, you realize that your opportunities pass, and that's that.
Speaking of that, one guy just got a tenure track position at Eastman in music theory job. He's 29, so that was interesting. I'm going to be turning, oh my goodness, I'm going to be turning 32 this year. And so one of the tenure track professors, new professor who's been there for a year, is a couple years younger than me. So it's kind of like that's it for me. I think also there's this stage like, okay, well, if the PhD doesn't work out, now I'm that loser who doesn't know what he's doing. And even if it does work out,
you're that guy who has a useless PhD.
well, yeah, especially if I get but like, I'm assuming this. I'm banking on it working out at this point, but even still, I'm still like later in the game. Like you all, I'm assuming have like jobs that make enough money.
You assume incorrectly.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
there's never enough money. Never enough money, Aaron.
I make $16,000 a year. That's a good stipend.
But here's the irony.
That's all I make at 32.
Here's the irony in that, though, is that when I look at what you're doing, I say Aaron is following his passions that he's always liked. I'm a banker. I don't like money. Mm-hmm. I just do it because it pays the bills. I was a history major.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's.
Yeah, well, and one thing about that, I think one thing, I'm moving a little towards resolution here because I know it's getting late for you guys on the East Coast, so I don't want to keep you up forever. But, one thing for me, and I think this is, I think for a long time people define themselves by what they did. You ask, and I think you even still see this today. You go to, church or work or something, or you meet someone new and you say, hey, what do you do? And they say something and they're saying their job usually. If someone asks me what I do, I mean, I do web development and content management for my department's website. That's far down the list when people ask me what I do. I mean, I'll refer to myself as a blogger, as a game reviewer, as a father, before I'd ever come to what I actually am paid to do. And I think that maybe increasingly we're starting to get to this point where people are like, they're willing to do stuff for free if they really like it, to a point. I think once you get to a certain age, it's like, if no one's going to pay me for this, I'm going to just cool it. It becomes more trouble than it's worth. But I also think, I mean, that's been something that has actually kept me a little sane, is being able to do blogging and reviewing and stuff, because I don't get paid to do it, but it does at least feel like, hey, this is something I really enjoy, and I'm not getting paid for it, but at least I enjoy it. So.
Before we completely wrap up, if it's possible, I put something in the sidebar. Just, did anyone hear that opening strumming, just simple strumming of the chords at the beginning, kind of sound a little Collective Soulish with the run, with the simple.
In my former days as a very dedicated Collective Soul fan, yes, I did. I did pull that file up when you typed it here in the chat, and I was like, oh, John. No, I hear it.
And it reminded me of. If Toby Locker is randomly listening, I remember hanging out with Toby. It was like the classic song for people who knew one chord on the guitar.
Everyone needs those. Everyone needs those.
I would go to Toby's house and he would break out his classical guitar, play the C major chord, and strum the beginning of Collective Soul, and start singing. And it was great, but that kind of anyway, it just kind of felt like I'm curious what all the other what the other cloud of songs there are that kind of begin with that kind of simple kind of strumming of a chord. It sounds great, and but it's just kind of an interesting. It felt like that to me at the beginning.
Well, my song that I always play to look impressive on a guitar, because I don't play at all. I think I play less than any of the four of us, and I can play the first couple bars to Nothing Else Matters because there's actually no chord.
There you go.
You play it open.
Yes.
Stick to your strengths.
That's right.
By the way, Aaron, with this whole like finding my place in this world type thing, Michael W. Smith.
That's
right. Guys, let's do Michael W. Smith albums. Everyone has
Looking for a reason.
Oh, wait,
Going through the night to find my place in this world.
Can that be our outro? Can we just establish that right now? That's just the outro for this whole thing?
Every month.
The friends are friends forever.
Yes.
All right.
That's a fabulous song.
Hey, do we want to let anyone know what we're going to be doing next time?
Yeah,
we know yet.
Go ahead and do Nate, give us a preview.
Yeah, next time our structure from now on, if you're watching this for some reason, our structure next time is hey, you've probably been spared a lot of our discussions of our own post-millennial angst and Aaron telling us why his song was funny, but what we're gonna do moving to a format is one of us is gonna pick a whole album to talk about, and then each of the other people will pick a single song, and hopefully it won't be too unmanageable. But I drew the straw. I'm picking the album first, and I've picked Document by REM, which is their release from 1987. So kind of their breakthrough. So that's gonna be what the discussion I'm gonna be leading next time.
I chose The Wire by Haim. I don't know how to say their name still.
The Wire by Haim.
It's those four chicks who make really good music.
Those ones.
What's that?
Those chicks.
Yeah, those chicks. It's a great song. I've had it in my head for a very long time. It's a great album that came out last year, and I thought of it today because somebody did a mashup of season 4 of The Wire over this song, and
I saw that.
It's a good contrast. So, but it's a great song anyway. I think it's a really great pop. If you listen to it, you'll probably have it in your head for a month. But
thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I thought
so. That was my choice.
I also thought I would ask a question for the audience. It's between two songs. And it's what you guys want. Do you want 80s thrash metal? Or do you want, which would be more, again, going back to, that sounds like Aaron, or do you want country blues?
Let's branch out.
I want 80s thrash metal.
Okay, one vote.
I'm afraid of your country bluegrass obsession, so I'm going to go with thrash metal also.
I'm going to be way out of my depth in either direction, so you follow your heart, Aaron. I will go with majority.
Well, my heart wants to do country bluegrass, but I kind of want, if you guys are more interested in thrash metal, then we'll go there for now. And now we'll have time for country.
Let me ask this: what are the two songs?
Okay, so Callin' Baton Rouge by Newgrass Revival, an 80s group with Bella Fleck on the banjo. Great classic country bluegrass, kind of newgrass, quote-unquote, hit. And Angel of Death by Slayer.
Nice. Contrast
the
is not a
juxtaposition
problem.
of those two songs is hilarious.
Callin' Baton Rouge or Angel of Death.
Let's do a mashup of those.
There you go.
And put that over season 5 of The Wire for some reason.
No, I say go for the Death Angel or whatever.
I think we're going with Angel of Death.
Angel of Death. Let's do it.
We'll hit your
Angel of Death.
Hit your bluesgrass later.
We have lots of time for bluegrass.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've ever said that phrase in my life.
John, what's yours?
I'm going to go with Out of Tears by the Rolling Stones. It's off Voodoo Lounge, which is probably one of their only actual successful albums that we all would have been alive to listen to.
Right.
Because because a lot of the other ones that were really, wildly successful were, way
Exile
before our
on Main
times.
Street.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah, in the 70s and the 60s.
Yeah.
So maybe some I don't know, wildly successful in the 80s. It's
Probably
not my,
Tattoo You would be the big one.
Yeah, it's not my preferred decade of Rolling Stones, but Voodoo Lounge is probably my favorite of their albums. It also won a Grammy, so it has some actual teeth to it. Not that Grammys mean anything anymore, but
I was gonna say the Grammys, no.
Never.
The Grammys, no, man.
yeah, they don't really mean anything anymore. But I did like that album. So that's a song I was listening to tonight, and I was like, oh, it's a good song. It's a little depressing, but
Hey, we already have Angel of Death by Slayer, so I don't think that'll be a problem.
It's only uphill from there.
That's
Yeah.
what-
Yes. So next time we will discuss the full album document. I've listened to it a couple times actually.
yeah, I like it. Of course, I liked it before, but I'd like to
and-
re-listen to.
So I guess at this point we can formally end our hangout, and but I don't want to stop the broadcast because I think that ends the hangout, and I think we just need to talk some business real quick and then be done. So,
All right.
so thank you for chiming in, even though you can still watch us talk business.